Hi, Eric. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Glad to be here.
This is Dr. Wendy, and today I am interviewing Eric Edmeades, who is the creator and founder of WildFit, which is a nutritional lifestyle program. Eric, like many of us, had chronic health conditions and was told that the only answer was surgery. Eric chose not to have surgery, and he instead changed his diet. And in 30 days, his chronic health conditions improved, which led him on a quest to figure out why in the world did diet help when the medical profession told him his only answer was surgery. His story is pretty amazing, and it even led him to living with the Bushmen in Africa, that story is pretty wild. So Eric doesn't believe in diets. He is more of a lifestyle change guy. He is on a mission to create how we relate to food. He has mastered the combination of psychology of food with nutrition, and especially how it comes to emotional eating. And I'm sure many of you right now are dealing with some emotional eating with this COVID-19 or maybe COVID-19 pounds. And I'm so excited to introduce you to him and his work. So let's get started. So Eric, looking at you today, no one would ever believe for many years that you were at the bottom rung of your health, that you were dealing with chronic health conditions, because right now it looks like you're at the top rung of health. And I know that for you, that you don't stop. You're a researcher and you're always trying to figure out how to make things better in relation to food and diet. So throughout you're going through your conditions, what was the aha moment that caused you to take a turn and go to diet?
I had a few aha moments, but most of the really powerful ones didn't come until after the experiment. What I mean is that, one of the things that happens, and, as a doctor, I'm sure you've seen this, but young people, when they're in pain and they don't really know how to communicate their pain, or the adults around them aren't really taking them seriously about their pain, they eventually kind of just sort of numb the pain away. It interrupts their sleep. It makes it difficult for them to pay attention to their studies. But at the end of the day, they stop complaining about it. And I was kind of at that stage where I just didn't think of myself as being sick. I just thought of me as me. And where it finally came to a head was when one of the specialists that I went to go see yet again, after all the pills and the injections and the inhalants and the creams and all the various things that they'd tried to, do what I would now call symptom suppressing. Finally the doctor says, "Oh my God, look at those tonsils of yours. We got to cut those out. We have to have a tonsillectomy." Now, a lot of people think of a tonsillectomy as kind of a trivial thing. And I know you don't, but I know many people do. But I can say this for sure, for people who don't know, even if it is a trivial thing at 21 with a fully integrated throat, it's a serious surgery. And I was terrified. I was going to have to go under general anesthetic. I didn't want to go. I was like, what? So then I started talking to some friends of mine about it. And they're like, "Well, what about food?" And I'm like, "What about food? What do you mean food? Yeah, let's go eat some." what's it? And what happened was they basically challenged me and said, "Well, look, you consider yourself a scientist, don't you?" And I go, "Yeah, I mean, I'm not a scientist, but I consider myself a pocket scientist. I like to experiment. So, well, why don't you try a 30-day experiment where you don't eat this and you eat a little more of that? And I mean, what's the harm of trying it?" And so I did. And that was not the aha moment. That was the whatever moment. 2 weeks later, though, I breathed through my sinuses for the first time unaided in years. And if anybody's ever had that flu where you're, I don't know, Wendy, if you've ever had that flu where you get to like a week and a half of flu and you're like, "I'm not sure if this carries on, if life will even be worth living," if you've ever had that flu.
Yeah, for sure.
But the first day you wake up and you go, "Oh, well, can you imagine how that would feel after 5 years?" And I'll tell you, it's good, but it's also painful because your sinus tissues are all unused to the air and it's cold and painful. And my eyes watered and I was like, "Oh my God, what's going on? My head feels funny." And I was breathing through my sinuses. And then around about that same time, I went into the bathroom. And anybody who's ever suffered with acne knows the difference between old acne and new acne. It's just one of those things. If you suffered with acne, you start planning your social engagements. You're like, "Yeah, I can agree to go to that party next week. I don't have any new acne." Well, I looked in the mirror, no new acne was coming. Every spot on my face was old and nothing new was coming up. 2 weeks later, no acne, breathing solidly through my sinuses, no digestive pains. I'd lost 35 pounds. All my sinus infections were gone. That was the aha moment. That was it. And then it was followed by a really fascinating aha moment where my doctor called me and said, okay, now your surgery's coming up in a few days. And I'm like, no, I'm not coming for the surgery. And he's like, Eric, I know surgery is kind of scary, but you know, we've talked about this. We got to end the pain. You got to end the suffering. So no, I think I've handled it. Sometimes symptoms go away. And then sometimes people are tempted to cancel their surgeries and their symptoms go away, but then they miss their surgery window. And then the symptoms come back and they're in pain again. No. I've handled it. I'm not sick at all anymore. I've lost all this weight. I have all this energy. Okay, bye-bye. Like, you know, Wendy, look, today there are very open-minded doctors out there. It happens all the time where we have doctors contact us because their clients have had such phenomenal client recovery that their doctors call us and go, what have you done? But doctors 20 years ago didn't do that. They just ignored it. He never once was curious how I had fixed it. And that was the second big aha moment. First, that I was able to fix it. B, that my doctor wasn't and wasn't even curious.
Yeah. It's quite amazing. And I know a lot of my patients can understand what you just went through. Yeah, for sure. All right. In North America, we are fortunate to be one of the most bountiful continents on the planet, but you're really quick to point out that we are overfed and undernourished. Would you be so kind to explain to my viewers what that means and how it relates to them?
Okay, so food. I think one of the things we can take a look at is how do we define food? Right now, we define food as that which we eat.
Yeah.
If we put it in our mouth, we consider it to be food. But I would argue that that's not entirely true. Like, for example, junk food isn't food at all. And so then we have to take a look at, well, how would something actually make it through the definition of food? And I would say that in order for it to be actual food, it would have to have some value. Otherwise, it's just a drug or it's just a flavor, you know, like chewing gum. It's not food. So then what value would food have to have? Well, basically, in the very simplest sense, there are two things that we get from food. There's some other things, but right now, just keeping it simple, there are two things that we get from food: energy and non-energy nutrients. So energy, we call calories, which is a made up measurement of theoretical food energy. And of course, the primary fuel systems of the body are protein, sugar, and fat. And so when we eat food, we extract things from the food, calories from the food, and then we're going to use that as energy. Then there's non-energy nutrients. So non-energy nutrients include amino acids. Notice I said amino acids and not proteins, because you see, when people say, are you getting enough protein? Immediately that says that they don't really understand nutrition, because asking somebody if they're getting enough protein is a bit like asking, are they getting enough air? It's not actually air that you need. It's oxygen. It's not actually protein that you need. It's whole complete proteins with all the amino acids that you need, and the various vitamins and minerals and other non-energy nutrients. In our world today, we are being overfed the energy component of food and underfed the non-energy nutrients. So in other words, we're overfed and therefore overweight as a population around the developed world, and we're undernourished, which means that we're actually starving to death. And what's fascinating about that is it's one of the reasons that we're hungry all the time, even when we're overweight, because the body's going, well, look, you got a lot of energy on the old body here, but you're missing on vitamin this and vitamin that and mineral this and amino acid that and fat this, and you need these things. So go eat some more. And then we go on a calorie restriction diet, which is one of the most disastrous and broken concepts of the diet industry ever. You go on a calorie restriction diet, and now you start reducing the amount of calories, which you kind of needed to do on some level, but you even further reduce the non-energy nutrient intake you're taking, and you end up starving even further, which is why so often people have what they call yo-yo diets or boomerang diets, where they make some progress and then they snap back, not to where they were, but even worse.
Yes. Every single day you see that. Yeah. So this is one thing I think most people don't realize is that, I'm not sure where I heard it from you, but there are 65 different names for sugar. It's like people know glucose, fructose, lactose, and then there's a whole bunch more. So why in the world, I'd like my people to know why they're putting so much sugar in everything. It's like, man, it is fascinating. It is really, really fascinating. So why are they putting the sugar in? Well, there's a lot of reasons for it.
One of them is that sugar is addictive. And so by adding sugar to the food, they can erode away at your food freedom. They can erode away at your conscious decision. In other words, addiction will power unconscious decisions. So the more addicted you are, the more likely you are to buy that thing. So put sugar in it and you'll cause addiction, which is, in marketing terms, addiction is a great thing because it means people buy. Then the other thing that sugar does is it stimulates your appetite. So when you eat sugar, it actually makes you hungry. So, well, that's a bit of a problem because you see, if you eat sugar, it makes you hungry. And so they put sugar in the food to make you eat more.
Hungry.
Because again, talk to any marketing consultant. You go, I want to improve sales in my company. I want to improve revenues in my company. And what they'll do is they'll tell you, well, there's a lot of ways you can do it. You can increase the price. You can reduce the cost. You can get more clients. And they go, yeah, but I think we're at the maximum price. We've got all the clients we can, we've got everybody, and we've reduced the cost down to nothing, which by the way means reducing the nutritional value, right?
Yeah.
But then like, well, we've done all that. What now can we do? And they go, well, you could get those same clients to buy even more. How could we get them to buy more? They're full. Well, we could trick their neurology into thinking that they're still hungry. How could we do that? We could understand the biochemistry of the body. And there's a few ways we could do that. The one is that if we give them food that's nutritionally empty, that doesn't have a great deal of nutritional value, then they will be driven to continue eating. The second one is that if we can cause an insulin spike in them, then we're going to give them this immediate blood sugar rush, which is going to make them feel good and give them a bunch of dopamine, like a drug experience. But then 30 minutes later, they're going to have this insulin shock, which is going to create a sugar craving, low blood sugar, which is going to drive them to eat some more. If we did that, people might eat 2 or 3 plates compared to the only one. Yeah. And Wendy, like, I know you've seen this, but I remember as a kid, I remember this so well. I would go into a restaurant and I'd be like, why did they give away the free bread? Like, that's just stupid, giving away free bread. They're going to give away free bread. I'm going to load up on the free bread. Then I'm not going to need to order, an appetizer, and I won't have to order dessert. And man, those guys are idiots, like totally idiots. And then, but the problem is that if you eat the bread, guess what? You order dessert.
For sure.
And that's because bread does both of those things. Bread messes up your digestion because the wheat is fighting the digestive process. The wheat doesn't want to be digested. It wants to become a plant, and it has enzyme blockers and hormone triggers and lectins, and it's fighting you. So your body's like having a hard time digesting anything else that's in there. So your body's going, we need more nutrients. We're not getting anything. And then meantime, the bread is a carbohydrate, and most bread in restaurants is a crappy carbohydrate.
Yeah,
so then you get this blood sugar rush, and then you're hungry. So you got to have dessert. I mean, it's genius marketing.
It is. My husband and I were in Vegas, and there's this family, and they had, I don't know how many plates they were eating. These things were piled, right? And I remember one of them sitting back, kind of rubbing the belly, and then we couldn't completely hear, but you could see, like, do you want dessert? And they're like, they're stuffed to the gills, right? But they're like, dessert? Yeah. I'm like, oh my word, how can you do that? But there you go. That is why.
It's so true. And then, you mentioned the 65 names of sugar. One of the reasons for that is the sugar industry has been incredibly intelligent. They really have done a great job of protecting their industry. And in the 1950s, there was some very credible science that was demonstrating that sugar was causing inflammation in the cardiovascular system, which was contributing to the development of heart disease. And they kind of knew that this would be bad news for them from a marketing perspective. And so what they did is they hired 2 Harvard researchers to commission a study that would instead blame fat for heart disease.
Yeah.
And that study got picked up and published in the New England Journal of Medicine. And this is pre-1984, when you didn't have to disclose the funder. So that, and if you could get your paper published in the journal, then it would become lore in the industry. And the low fat movement was born. And what's really fascinating about that is that people kind of go, well, really, now you sound like you're into conspiracy theories and all that kind of stuff, right? But the funny thing about this is that it's not so much that it's a conspiracy theory, it's that it's a fact that this really did happen. And I remember reading some time ago, there was around the time that this happened, there was a big conference of sugar growers. And it was like the Sugar Research Foundation. There was a guy, his name I think is Henry Haas or something like that. And this is like in mid 50s or something. And he's speaking at like I don't know what it is, the sugar beets, I think it's called like the American Society of Sugar Beet Growers or something like that. And he says this, he goes, leading nutritionists are pointing out that there's a correlation between a high fat diet and the formation of cholesterol and arterial disease and all this kind of stuff. And so now, as these people begin to realize this, they're going to stop eating so much fat. And that's going to free up 20% of the plate calories. And if we, the sugar industry, can scoop up those 20% and maintain the 20% we've already got, it's going to be a major economic boon for us. Now, he said this publicly. I have the direct quote somewhere in my writing here. But the one thing he doesn't point out is that the leading researchers that he's talking about, he paid them. He paid them. And so, it was like a total, and then that is part of why there are also 65 names of sugar. You've got, agave nectar, Barbados sugar, barley malt, dextrose, mannose, treacle, invert sugar syrup, sugar sorghum, sucrose, saccharose, rice syrup, castro sugar. I mean, I go on and on and on. They did that because people started looking for sugar on the label. So like, shit, we got to hide it.
Right.
We got to make sure we hide it. And so now people get tired. They don't, you don't carry a translator with you to the grocery store. So you look at it and go, I don't know if that's sugar, polysaccharide, what? And you just buy it anyway.
Right. Oh man, the best thing on the planet was like in the 90s, I remember fat makes you fat. Okay, I don't want to eat fat. Oh, I can go eat those Entenmann's. There's no fat in that. Score. And what happened? We got fatter. I got fatter. It was crazy. And now I'm like, that was so screwed up, and we bought into it. And here we are. Yep.
Hey, they bought and paid for it. It was a smart move. But, and Wendy, listen, I'm sure you get this. And certainly if you've been around the WildFit world, you'll know this is a very core part of our teachings. But when you have a client walk into your office that has, say, what Mark Hyman would call diabesity, they're obese, plus they're dealing with borderline diabetes or actual diabetes type 2, then here's what I want you to say to them. And I'm sure you got this, but they sit down and you got to say this to them. None of this is your fault.
Right?
None of this is your fault. This was done to you by an irreprehensible, disgusting food manufacturing, food marketing, food distribution system that used their profits to lobby to create disgusting food regulation, food legislation, and food education systems that did this to you. It is not your fault. Please don't let them shame you, because the food industry is going to be the first one to tell you that this is your fault. If you moved a little more, you wouldn't be so fat. Right. They blame you. In fact, Wendy, I haven't really said this yet publicly, but we have a book coming out, and in it, there's a phrase we put in there. I don't know if you'll have heard this before, but I want to end the use of the term lifestyle disease, because you know what lifestyle disease is? An empty, rubbish attempt by the food industry and the government to shift the blame for their misdeeds onto the consumer. If it's a lifestyle disease, you did it to yourself. No, you didn't. You didn't do it to yourself. They did it to us. And the proof of that is, look how many people they got. This is not an individualized thing. When you and I were kids, there were 2 or 3 overweight kids in the whole school. Now there are thin kids, and they're getting teased about being thin because the population has shifted in such a different direction. So again, patient walks into your office. None of this is your fault. This was done to you, but it is your responsibility to turn it around.
That's true. I read a book, can't remember what one it was, but it was a research scientist that said it's his job to figure out the right amount of salt, sugar, and fat to make you addicted to their food, right? That's,
They've got biochemists that are figuring out how to make it addictive. They've got psychiatrists and psychologists figuring out how to get you to take action on their brand and how to get addicted to it. Look, Wendy, I went to an Anglican school. I remember the nativity story. There was the whole, there was that questionable pregnancy, and then the baby was born, and then there was the manger, and then there was the 3 wise men, and they brought frankincense, myrrh, and gold. Nobody brought candy canes, pumpkin pie. Like, how did that become Christmas? And then in the sequel, Mel Gibson was in the sequel, the Easter story. And I didn't see a single chocolate. I don't remember Judas did not bring chocolate to the party. There was no chocolate. But industry bought that holiday to the point that there are people today who feel like they cannot celebrate that holiday without chocolate. That's a bought and paid for idea.
Yeah, for sure. And then we beat ourselves up about it. Okay, well, and this goes right into it. So on a daily basis, most of us think that we're hungry, and we get those hunger pains midday. So we think we need to eat something, but you're telling us that we are dehydrated and that we should be drinking water. Most people don't. I tell them, are you drinking water? And they say, I'm never thirsty. Right?
Yeah.
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 So could you please talk about that a little bit?
So in our research and surveys of clients and stuff, we've been at this for 6-7 years. We've served tens of thousands of people in 130 countries. We now have coaches in 40 countries around the world. So we have some data and we have some experience. And one of the things that we've identified is that there are 6 primary hungers that we talk about. There are 6 primary reasons that people eat. And only one of them is actually a legitimate nutritional hunger. And it's called nutritional hunger. And this is where I guess it's the thalamus looks at your blood and it says, oh, look, we're running low on magnesium, or we're running low on vitamin D, or we're running low on amino acids. So go eat something. And nutritional hunger generally pushes fairly nondescript, non-specific cravings. Maybe a macro craving like I crave fat, or I crave salt, or I crave sweet. But it's not like you have this craving and it goes, go eat that leaf or go eat that meat. It's more a generalized sense of, oh, you're low on nutrition, go eat something. And that's because our ancestors didn't have a lot of choice about what they were eating. So there was no point in generating a specific craving, because who knows if that food was seasonally available. So bottom line is we feel nutritionally empty and we just get a message that says, go eat. But the other 5 hungers, they're different. They're non-nutritional. And one of them, the one you brought up, is thirst. And that's because, you know, Wendy, this is going to be shocking for a lot of people, but there was a time before water bottles. You know, there was a time before pottery. Right. And so our ancestors didn't, you know, that's the idea of being able to carry water around with them was a very new thing. So where did they get their water from? Well, they got their water from the food they ate. Yeah. Remember that most of the food, if they ate plant-based foods, if they were eating root vegetables or fruits or any vegetables, those are very water-rich foods. And back then when you went hunting, you didn't like hunt and then age the meat for 28 days and dehydrate it. You ate and it was fresh and it had water in it. And so a lot of our water came from the food that we eat. And so we have this sort of outdated app. And the way the outdated app works is like when we start to feel a little dehydrated, the body goes, eat something, eat something, eat something. You're dehydrated. Because we didn't need thirst because there wasn't water around all the time. So what was the more useful signal? The more useful signal was eat something. You went and got something that had water in it. There was no point in you being thirsty if there was no water. Sure. So thirst, by the time you're thirsty, it's too late. You should be drinking to avoid thirst. If you're thirsty because it's hot and you've been running and your mouth is dry, that's different. But if you're thirsty like in you, you're dehydrated and you've waited too long, you should be drinking preemptively. You don't drink for your water today, incidentally. Like this is a very important feature. If you drink on a Monday, you won't use any of that water till Tuesday or Wednesday. It takes time for the water to make its way into you. In fact, you know, I always thought that was true, but then I did a bunch of reading about it, but then I tested it. I've climbed Kilimanjaro 7 times. One of the things they tell you when you're climbing Kilimanjaro is drink a lot of water and it will help you fight off altitude sickness. Okay, it does. But the mistake they make is they start making you drink the water while you're on the mountain. It's already too late. And it just makes you pee all the time because, you know, you're drinking on the mountain and now you have to get up and pee. It's -20 outside and there's no oxygen. It's unpleasant. I started experimenting with topping up and drinking liters and liters of water 3-4 days before the summit and then not drinking much on the mountain at all. And boom, I walked right up to the summit, no altitude problems. You have to drink in advance of the problem. The trouble we have today is that the early warning system that you have a problem is to eat. And then once you're thirsty, it's almost too late. So what happens now? Somebody's a little dehydrated. They get this outdated message, eat something. What do? They go eat some Hostess potato chips. Right? Which has no water in it and requires water to process it. So now they have even less water in them and they get this message, eat something. Just one more chip.
Just one. Yeah. Yeah. Nice. All right. So you are on a global mission to change lives of 1 million people with WildFit. What stands out for you as the most memorable or life-changing story a student has shared with you?
Wendy, wow, there are so many. Most memorable. I'm going to share 2 with you. One, because it's just, I'm going to try and only share 2 with you. But this one just happened quite recently. There's a woman who has 2 children, and one of her children has a genetic disorder. I can't think of the name now, maybe PCOS. but it basically means he has an insatiable appetite and is absolutely prone to diabetes. And the doctors tell him he's going to gain weight his entire life. He will never, ever be able to lose weight. He will never, ever be able to eat enough to not feel feel satiated. And he will almost certainly be a diabetic. Probably won't live past 45 years old. Definitely going to lose eyesight and have amputations and stuff that are associated with all these issues. But it's a genetic disorder, so there's not much you can do about it. Now, generally in WildFit, we say to you, I don't care what the injury or the disease is, as long as it's not a genetic disorder, getting your relationship with air, water, and food will help you heal from just about anything with the support of the right medical support. But genetic things are different, right? There's some differences there. Only guess what? Maybe not. This woman writes to me and she goes, I can't believe it. My 14-year-old son has lost 20 kilograms. The doctor says he will never be able to lose weight. He's lost 20 kilograms. Your discussion about the food angel and the food devil and the sugar monster in the coaching construct of the WildFit has so inspired him to gain consciousness over his relationship with food that he now has a food angel and a food devil and a sugar monster on the fridge, and he talks to them when he gets to the fridge. And he then decides not to eat. He is no longer needing to inject insulin. He will not be a diabetic. You've changed his life forever.
Wow.
I get letters like that. Wendy, I'm not exaggerating. I get letters like that every day, just about every day. It's phenomenal. One of my other really favorite ones is a young guy of about 28 years old, type 1 diabetic. Nothing we can do about that, right?
Right.
I mean, we all know type 2 is reversible. I think we're finally waking up to the idea that type 2 is reversible. Like, 10 years ago, if you wrote on Google, type 2 is curable, they take your website down. No, you can't say that. Now you're allowed to say it because, the prevailing science says it's actually true. Type 1 can't do it. Different thing. Only this guy does the program, loses 40 pounds, and cuts his insulin dependency down by 70%. Wow. Well, what a lot of people won't know is what that means is he's doing less damage to his entire internal system, which means he has a much less chance now of losing any eyesight, much less chance of having any circulatory issues and heart disease, much less chance of having any kind of amputations, especially because we did this for him in his mid-20s. Right. And then one more. I said two, but one more. This is kind of one of my favorite ones because it's one of my earliest ones. And it was an Estonian guy. And Estonia is actually a very healthy country compared to most. Basically what happens is American food patterns start in Anaheim, California with the fast food, revolution, and it spreads out from there. So Californians are the first ones to get really sick, and then America's the first country to get really sick, and then American food habits start spreading east and west, and they get to London about 15 years ago. I moved to London around this time, and people in London were fairly healthy. Within the 10 years I lived in London, the population of the United Kingdom grew by 30%. And I'm not talking about the number of people. I'm talking about the waist size. Like I watched them vast. I watched them get bigger. Then those same food rules, KFC, McDonald's, TGI Fridays, they all start moving into Europe. And guess what? Europeans start getting there. Estonia is still a very healthy country, but this guy moved to Stockholm and started eating a more Western life. So by the time I met him, he's like 40 pounds overweight. In fact, if you check in, I don't know if you're going to print this in the newsletter, but if you write to Kelsey, we'll give you the before after pictures for him if you like, because you can throw it right in the article. He comes in and he does the program, and his before after pictures are so striking that it looks like the dying 48-year-old father and the 19-year-old son. And the pictures are 3 months apart. And he then goes off and he bumps into a military buddy of his, and the military buddy of his goes, "My God, you haven't changed one bit in all these years." And he's like, "Well, I probably need to show you the middle picture," because he had changed so much in one direction and he came back the other direction. But the story doesn't end there. He and his wife had been they'd had 2 children, and they were trying to get pregnant for 5 years, and they tried IVF and all the different fertility treatments and what have you. Nothing was working. They'd kind of given up. Well, Wendy, it gets really cool because I happen to be in Stockholm and I'm at a talk. I'm in the audience, and there he is on the stage, and he looks amazing. I mean, honestly, he looks 20 years old and he's 40, like he looks incredible. And he's on the stage, and his English is really broken. And something you need to know in order for me to do this properly, Estonia doesn't have gender pronouns. They don't have he and she. They don't have that. So when they speak English, they often confuse he and she because they don't have that concept. So he's on stage and he goes, "Me and wife, we try get pregnant 5 years, 2 babies, then 5 years, no babies, then WildFit. Then I come home And my wife, he tell me he pregnant. And it's like, it's just so like everybody busts out laughing because they know he messed up the he and all this kind of stuff. And then he's like, yeah. And then wife tell me Eric's fault. So I check Eric's schedule. Eric not in Stockholm, not Eric's fault. And Wendy, you couldn't make this up. They named the kid Eric.
Oh,
I'm not kidding you. They really did. And, so I'm at a place right now where I have hard days like anybody else. I have my personal battles like anybody else. I'm on lockdown alone. I've been alone for 2 months. Like I have my ups and downs like anybody else, but you know what? I get letters from people like that, no kidding, almost every day, that they've lost this weight, or that they've ended their inflammation, or that their sex drive is back, or that their cognition is working. It's the greatest honor of my life.
For sure. That is so good. Yeah. I just think about how many sick people, and I'm just hoping that everybody who I send this letter to opens it and actually watches this, right? Just, yeah, you're great. So I appreciate you a lot. So is there anything else that you would like to add? Those are the questions that I had. So if there's anything that you would like to.
Well, Wendy, here's a really important thing. And I think it is really important, especially if somebody's going to read this in the newsletter and go, yeah, whatever. I mean, there's diets and there's diets and there's diets and there's diets and whatever. As you said it in the introduction that I'm against diets. I'm actually not. I'm not against diets. I'm all for diets. I think the elephant should have one. I think the lion should have one. I think the leafcutter ant should have one. I think the horse should have a diet. I think every animal on earth, has a diet. What I'm against is using the word diet incorrectly. And that's where we say that diet means temporary alteration to your normal eating pattern in order to fit into this outfit for that special occasion. Like the minute somebody is changing what's going on and they're not planning on making a permanent change, or they can't because they don't have the willpower, then they're damaging themselves. And that's why the average person gains 3 pounds every time they go on a diet. And I think the diet success rate in the industry is about 1%, and 90% of those people have boomeranged back by the end of a year anyway. Like we are in serious, serious trouble. And so if anybody is sitting here going, oh God, it's just another food guy who's just going to tell me this and tell me that. Let me say this. We have something like an 85% completion rate in our programs, a 3-month food program. Our publisher is Mind Valley, one of the largest and most reputable digital program publishers in the world. And we've 2 years won the award for the highest customer rating of any of the programs on the platform. This is an unlikely reality, because some of the other courses are how to make money, how to expand your memory, how to have a great relationship. I mean, they're 30-day programs or 2-week programs, much easier to get a high customer service rating. The reason that we've got that customer service rating is because it works. Yeah. And Wendy, the reason it works, and I know you know this, but I want to be really clear that any diet that focuses on rules is going to fail. In fact, one of our expressions at WildFit is that diets, like people don't fail diets. They don't. Diets fail people. Yeah. It is the diet's responsibility when it fails. And the minute you create a diet that's just a bunch of rules, then what you've created is a program designed to diminish self-esteem. Here's a rule, you break it, your self-esteem goes down, you can't keep to the next rule. And that's why when we've polled our clients at the 2-week mark, we have classes that sometimes have 500 or 1,000 plus people, and we have more intimate classes where people have only 8 in them, depending on if they're working with a coach and stuff. But at 2 weeks, we often ask them, how many of you, this is the longest you've ever stuck with a health program or diet? And Wendy, it's 85% of them. Oh, wow. That 2 weeks is the longest they've stuck with something. And you know how they feel having stuck with it for 2 weeks? They have hope. They have hope, and that hope pulls them through and they get it done. And the reason that it works so well is that I am ultimately sure, some people call me like what do they call it? A nutritional anthropologist, because of the nutrition work I've done. But that's not actually the magic. The real magic is the food psychology bit. Yeah. The real magic is that people will ultimately, their bodies will ultimately eat what they want. And what we have to do is change what they want. And the best way I can depict this for you is that one of the founders of Zumba, the massive fitness billion-dollar company Zumba, he did our program, and he immediately somehow got a hold of my team, and he booked a meeting with me. And he and I are sitting in a Zoom meeting just like you and I are right now. And he goes, Eric, you guys are going to do to the diet industry what we did to the fitness industry. How can I help you do it? And I go, oh my God, of course, I'd love your help. Why? And he goes, look, Eric, me and the whole world are out there trying to find a diet they can stick to, and you've created a lifestyle that sticks to them. And that is the key. The key is not to find some diet to help you fit into an outfit or achieve a short-term goal. The key is to change who you are and to radically change your relationship with food. And I would say this very simply, Wendy. Anybody who gives me 14 days, I'll give them their body back. I'll give them their food relationship back. I'll give them food freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. All right. Where can, well, I guess my viewers, not readers, find out more about you?
Well, they can go to getwildfit.com. And if they want to take the 14-day reset, they go to getwildfit.com/reset. And that'll take them through a beautiful new 14-day structured program to help them change their psychology with food in just 2 weeks.
Perfect. 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 Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And yeah, I appreciate your time and everything that you're doing. And my patients are going to love this. So thank you so much.
Wendy, I want to acknowledge you and I want to thank you. I grew up in a family full of doctors. And frankly, as a kid, I kind of did want to go to medical school. I would never have made it. I'm too dyslexic and too short. I'm too quick start. I wouldn't have made it through medical school. I have so much admiration for anybody who can. I just want to say this. My grandfather and my uncle, both world-renowned orthopedic surgeons, showed me that doctors were arrogant and intransigent. They knew everything and they weren't open to stuff. And more, I'm getting these requests. And I am so encouraged and happy about that because I'm really valuing the open-minded of this, that this is not a competition. This is not a like who's right. This is let's get the clients the result. And I really want to commend you because you know as well as I do, 10 years ago, no doctor's talking to some diet author guy about, they just weren't doing it. There was just too much arrogance. So I just want to commend you for being open-minded, for being willing and to go out and get your people the right information.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. This is great. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Wendy.